Hi there, and welcome to my latest Substack. I'm Adrian Goldberg, and we're marking the release of the fab new album by Heavenly called Highway to Heavenly on their own Sketwax label. I'm joined by the vocalist and keyboard player Kathy Rogers, Peter Momchiloff, who is the band's guitarist, Rob Percy, the bassist, vocalist Amelia Fletcher. Welcome all. I'm going to leave it to whichever one of you wants to answer this first question. So, Operation Heavenly was your last album in '96. That was accompanied by tragic circumstances, which we may or may not recount here. 30 years since then. So tell me what's the same and what is different about Heavenly 2026 style?
Well, one very obvious difference is that we have Ian Button on board as our drummer, and that's been a really refreshing and revitalizing development for us. That allowed us to reform. We probably wouldn't have, we might not have been able to do it if we hadn't found someone who would fit in musically and personally. So we were lucky in that respect. So although he's not here, he has been crucial to Heavenly 2.0.
Because in 1996, sadly, Martin Fletcher, the original drummer, took his own life, and that kind of really led to the breakup of the band. Is that fair to say at the time? You just didn't feel it was possible to carry on?
Yeah, pretty much it. When Matthew died, we didn't. It felt obvious that Heavenly was not going to carry on, and we weren't going to do music for the time being, at least. And then, obviously, after a while, we did start doing music again, but it never felt like it was going to be called Heavenly again because Heavenly involved Matthew. And yeah, I guess 3 decades later, we've managed to see it slightly differently. And yeah, maybe it couldn't have happened sooner, like Pete said. I think in terms of the songs, like we do kind of joke about continuation Heavenly songs and new Heavenly songs. I suspect that if we got average listeners to try and guess which we thought what fell into each category, they wouldn't agree with us. I think it's a lot of that is in our head. But I think that in terms of some of the rhythms and maybe in some of the messages and things, I think that there's things that feel newer, like some of the themes are themes of old and some of them feel more contemporary. And I think maybe we could say there's a bit more disco than on Operation Heavenly, but I think there's always been quite a diversity of different song types that have somehow sat together on an album, and I think that's true of this one as it was of the last one.
Yeah, and it still sounds, I mean, let's be clear about this. It still sounds very much like a Heavenly album. There is that great kind of 60s organ sound with the band. There's clearly an element of the edge of punk in there, always though, with that sweetness, which I think marked you out and kind of marked your departure from the more laddish sounds that were around in the 90s.
Yeah. Well, so what do you think? Do you think does it sound the same as Heavenly before, or does it sound different to you?
Yeah, and there's definitely continuity Heavenly going on, without a question. I don't think anybody would mistake it for not being a Heavenly album. It does sound to me, though, probably more clear musically. There's probably just better production. I don't know whether you've got into a studio or whether that's just the advances in home production. I'd be interested to hear about that. But clearly, some of the lyrics address influencers, YouTubers, stuff like that, which clearly wouldn't have been a thing in the early and mid 90s.
I think it's true that between Heavenly stopping and Heavenly starting again, the internet happened.
Yeah.
So this is digital world Heavenly.
Yeah, that's true. I realized something earlier, which is when it was kind of the 80s and 90s, or even now, I have a really clear idea of what 60s music sounds like. I don't have any clear idea of what 90s music sounds like. So I sent this album out to someone and they responded by saying, "Oh yeah, it sounds great, but just too 90s for us." And I was like, "Oh, all right, okay, I don't even know what that means." But I guess because it was us and we were 90s, that's just what we sound like.
I mean, one possibility is that by 90s sound, they mean a band in a room, because most records don't sound like that now, um, for better or worse. Most records sound a bit more produced, like somewhat contrived artifacts. So we're keeping it real. But I think there is a change in sound. I think in Heavenly in the 90s, there was a certain sort of franticness to it, things happening all the time at the same time, everything happening at once, straight on from one thing to another. And I think that was good. I think there's a bit less of that in this record. It's a bit more like if we've got a musical idea, we just let that come across and not be pushing it out of the way with lots of other things.
No, I think
Less
that's
me
what I was
chance.
referring to. I think there's a kind of a separation in the sound, really. There is just greater clarity between the instruments and so on. So, was it something that you went into a studio in the old-fashioned way and recorded, or did you manage to do it at home? Is that because I know we've spoken previously, Rob and Amelia, about say Swansea Sound, and with that band, you've managed to do a lot of stuff kind of remotely from each other, haven't you? And done it as sort of effectively home recordings.
Yeah, but it still sounds like a crap band in a room.
Yeah, we've gone for a hybrid where there's part crap band in a room. No, I think the answer is we've done it in a mixture of different ways. So some of it was all in a studio, and I think for me particularly because we recorded with Toby Burrows, who has got a brilliant collection of old keyboards, that was really great because I got to play on them rather than, I mean, I love my trusty Yamaha, which is from the 90s, the same one that always was.
Kathy, give it its proper name.
Chunky Boy. He's known as Chunky Boy. He's very heavy. He's got a flight case. He gives everyone back pain. Um, but then we did some bits in Rob and Amelia's. We did, I think there are some bits of vocals that Amelia did at home. There were some that we did in the studio. So it was a bit of a modern hybrid of approaches, I think. And I think the thing that you said about kind of sounds feeling very distinct, I don't remember it being something we discussed, but maybe it is partly a product of that. Thinking more about sort of like individual elements one at a time.
I think it's what Pete was saying, which is that if we've learned anything, it's occasionally just to shut up while somebody else does something. Which helps.
I'll always fight against that, though. We have this expression in Heavenly, which is the me chance phenomenon, where we're not ashamed of. Basically, I always think there's no such thing as too many layers of backing vocals, even if they're saying different words from what the main vocal is saying. And it's called me chance because there's an old Heavenly song where I think it might even end with Amelia singing me and me singing chance at the same time. And Rob sometimes dares to suggest that that's not entirely appropriate.
It always made me feel a bit stressed when that song ended, because can't you at least say the same word at the end?
I think we're on that front. I think if anything, we've got worse rather than better.
Oh, I like it when the vocals and the backing vocals don't match. Personally, that's just a thing of mine. But yeah, talking about modern things, obviously you're on, in an age of streaming. Obviously, you get the chance to buy your records in physical form, but that's a major shift, isn't it? Allows listenability. It doesn't necessarily get you a lot of royalties, but it allows you to be listened to. And you might think weirdly, and I would certainly think sort of in a slightly offbeat way, you have been picked up by the TikTok generation. That has been partly the remaking of Heavenly 2.0.
We do sometimes get algorithm reports from Amelia. Well, she says they're algorithm reports, maybe to give them like some gravitas. But yeah, obviously, like there's big differences in how people can experience the music. And I think it's quite odd how much you can find out if you want to look about who is listening to your music, like where they are and what their favorite songs are. And I'm sure that sort of like big bands use that kind of thing hugely. Like even we sort of joke about customizing a set list to what the preferences are of a particular place, but I don't think we would ever go that far. But I think it creates new questions about how much you want to be kind of making decisions and putting it out there versus kind of it feeling like a slightly more of a two-way process.
You know what, Kath, you've had a very successful career in television, and I've worked in telly, and there can be quite a conscious, an attempt anyway, a conscious ticking of boxes of demographics, and that kind of feels counter to. I can't believe you do that with your music, but I'm interested that you actually have the means by which, if you wanted to do that, you could target groups more closely, groups who already listen to you.
We do, yeah, we have the data, but actually I can't help thinking that if we were trying to target those people disastrously, and actually the only reason we've kind of been successful on TikTok and now Spotify is because we kind of slightly randomly did the thing that we did, and people no one else seemed to do it, and therefore it's been picked up and lots of youngsters like it. I think the only way in which it has influenced the songwriting is I guess I it was I was quite keen with writing the lyrics to not make the lyrics that young people absolutely wouldn't engage with. I wasn't trying too hard to make them ones that they would engage with, but I didn't want to kind of just be talking about being old.
Although we do have a song about being old.
It's true.
In fact, and we have a song about a very old person, so I don't think that doesn't seem like a major constraint.
I mean, the other factor of this newfound fame with TikTok is that we've managed to achieve a really big listenership just at a point where nobody pays you for it.
Well done.
That works out really well.
Peter, are you conscious of having a different audience, though? I mean, obviously, if you go and see a Heavenly gig, it'll be full of people who look broadly like me, mostly better looking, obviously, but with slightly greying hair. But is there a newer audience at your live shows?
Yeah, it's quite mixed, I think. I mean, everyone likes to think that young people are interested in their music. It genuinely does seem to be the case that the generational divide in music isn't as big as it was in the 20th century. You get lots of anecdotal evidence for this in terms of parents coming with their kids or the kids liking what the parents like. But we do see it in the numbers as well. As Amelia said earlier, we can crunch those numbers and we can see who's at the shows. So it does represent quite a broad swathe age-wise. We're doing an all ages show for that reason, which it's good to be in a position where you want to think about letting people under the age of 18 into your shows. And I think we've sold. Rob will know. Rob and Amelia will know. The all ages show was based on. Perhaps you could say something about the ticketing, Rob or Amelia.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite
Tricky
to do all ages shows because most venues aren't set up for it because they've got bars. We managed to persuade the Lexington to let us do a second show there, which is all ages, but that they have to the under 18 person has to be accompanied by somebody over 18, so it's a kind of compromise. And out in America,
the tickets are really complicated.
The tickets are quite complicated, but we have sold some, and the gig's nearly sold out. But there'll be as many oldies as there are young people at that one.
In fact, there might be more because it's a matinee, and the old people really like that.
They do, yeah. It kind of is aged at both extremes of the demographic.
It might be one of those gigs where actually the old people are really bored because they've had to accompany their children, and they're not the least bit interested.
Or the young people have been brought there just in order to get an all-age stick. While their granddad enjoys the indie pop. I mean, in America, we get a lot of messages from people in America saying, "Can you play an all-ages show?" which is sweet. And we try, but it's not always possible because they're hard to make them work, and there's no bar takings, so venues don't make much money on them. We do them, and the one that the most recent gig I think was in Islington, which was quite a big gig last summer, and there was a lot of people sort of,
That was 16 plus, which was good.
yeah, so there were teenagers at that one.
That one, in terms of who comes to our gigs, that one amused me because I was there for the briefing of the security staff. And the woman said, okay, we've been crunching our numbers, and the average age of people coming today is going to be 42. And I was like, what's funny is there's going to be no people that are aged 42 because they're exactly the wrong demographic. There's going to be loads of people over 50 and loads of people under 30.
Yeah,
Lyrically, where do you go in 2026, Amelia? You said that you don't want to write songs that exclude young people, but equally, you're not a kid anymore. But one thing that strikes me as a consistent in your lyrical writing is a strong, is it feminist? Feminist may even be too strong a word for it. Just like how horrible men often are to women, or boys are to girls, and people don't always hear it because of the sweetness of the tunes. But I just think it is worth addressing that, because that is something that is true in your songwriting then, and it's true in your songwriting now. And sadly, for all the talk of Me Too, for all the talk of wokeness in our culture, sadly, blokes are as vile as they've ever been.
I'm afraid that's true. And maybe women are sometimes more willing to speak up as a result, but not all women, obviously, and not all the time. And some of what we're seeing, men's behaviour having been in recent times, has been beyond anything that I'd ever dreamed, actually, in terms of appallingness. So, things haven't necessarily got better at all. But I think there's definitely some of those songs on this album. One of the things that I was very alert to was the whole fact that feminism has splintered. So I've gone from being very comfortable to calling myself a feminist to being a bit uncomfortable about it, because then you have to start qualifying what kind of feminist you are. And
Don't tell me we're in the world of intersectionality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think the other things on this album is there is definitely a few songs that are more about celebrating diversity than just about kind of telling the story from a female perspective.
Mm-hmm. And you've worked in an industry, Kath, I mentioned, in television, where powerful men have abused their positions, haven't they? I mean, it's a place where people have been able to hide in plain sight.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything particularly unique about television for that. I think that, like when we're talking about streamers or YouTube, I think that certain behaviors that just seem to persist, and maybe it's slightly easier to get away with them in certain contexts, but I don't think there's a safe place where those things don't happen. Whatever you have experience of, like, I've never met a woman who's like, oh gosh, yes, well, the things you're talking about, I've never experienced anything like that before. Yeah, I mean, my personal experience in telly wasn't particularly bad compared to other industries I've worked in, I don't think. Yeah. Academia is pretty bad. I mean, anywhere you work, you see it. Just has slightly different colours and textures.
Okay, Peter, what are you most looking forward to on the tour then? You got a few dates coming up. Let's move to sort of slightly lighter things. I can't imagine that there's too much rowdy behaviour on a Heavenly tour bus.
Well, we are revisiting Wales, where we haven't been for more than 30 years, which certainly the audiences used to be quite rumbustious there in the early days. So we'll see.
Yeah.
It'll be nice to get Wales. We haven't visited in this incarnation, so that will be really good. I think a lot of us. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, famously at a Tallulah, got our first band, which Kath It was called Tallulah Gosh. And when we played Wales, there was a massive fight in the car park afterwards. So maybe that'll happen.
Not provoked by your music, surely.
I think also the other thing about Wales is that they do the best heckling in Wales. Yeah, I've noticed that at Swansea Sound gigs, but also Hugh told me that a Huggy Bear gig in Newport, it wasn't at the pub, it was the previous venue. I can't remember what it was called. Somebody was shouting out, "Less structure in the music, less structure in the music." It's such a brilliant heckle. And
Was that in Newport? Was it then where the pub is?
Yeah. And so full marks to Newport for that. That's
Newport's a lively place on a Friday night. I've not been there for a gig, but it's a lively place.
It really is. It's like a sort of all the ballads feed into it. Well, a lot of ballads feed into it, and people come down there from the ballads and get pretty rat-assed and then shout sort of cryptic heckles at
Do you think we have the correct amount of structure in our music?
I don't know. We'll find out.
Well, we weren't trying to kickstart Western civilization from scratch like Huggy Bear were. So.
That's true. That's true.
But it's interesting. As I record this, I'm about 24 hours away from going to watch a play at Birmingham Rep called The Battle, which is about Brit pop. And it's funny, when you talked about you had a sense of what 60s music was, and it's harder to say what 90s music was. You know, often these generational things can be quite reductive. So the 90s is, in many readings of it, kind of reduced to this battle between Blur and Oasis, which I'm not easy. I mean, it actually isn't even true of Britpop, but you kind of stand aside from all that. And clearly you haven't been airbrushed from history. You've got a resonance now, and young people are picking up on that. I just find it kind of strange how whole decades can be reduced to 2 or 3 bands or 2 or 3 looks in fashion.
I mean, the same is
just
true
me
of
ranting,
clothes,
but
I would say you could say that of clothes, but actually maybe we're like that kind of that skirt that is never like exactly the thing, but is always a bit the thing. Like you could always wear it, and it's always doing quite a good job.
Is that what you are? You're the skirt that will always do quite a good job, are you?
I mean, I can think of worse things on my gravestone.
I think one of the advantages of Heavenly coming back is that when Heavenly were young, like a lot of people on that scene, dressed like old people. So now we just wear the same clothes and it's fine.
That's true.
I think there are some genre where it's really tough to be an old. You wouldn't want to be an old mod because you're looking really sharp on a Vespa, and if you're a bit overweight and you're sat on a Lambretta, it doesn't look so good, and the suit's a bit busting. But because I think the indie pop DIY fashion choice was basically what you could get from old people who died in charity shops. So yeah.
Brilliant. Has anything changed about how you kind of get together and write the songs? You know, is it a democratic process? How does that work? You have big fist fights about who gets to take a lead on a particular song?
It hasn't changed that much, actually. And I think that is what I've come to realize, that is what makes Heavenly, or probably what makes any band, is because I start off by writing the songs for the most part, and then bring them to the band, sometimes with words and sometimes without words. And then everyone kind of does their own bits. And somehow this thing that didn't really necessarily sound like a Heavenly song by the end really does. And it is it's the kind of alchemy of all those brains creates a particular sound. I mean, if I tried on my own to make a Heavenly record, I don't think it would work.
Yeah, I think I've read something about an interview you once, Amelia, when you talked about trying to write songs like Teenage Fan Club, and they never came out like Teenage Fan Club.
Yeah.
And if they had come out like Teenage Fan Club, then it wouldn't have been anything, would it? You know,
It's true. It's true. I mean, actually, I think that's probably the difference on this album is I guess maybe I was trying to write heavenly songs. I think on every other heavenly album, I've probably not tried to write heavenly songs.
And the result is the same.
Yeah.
Well, look, Highway to Heavenly is out on the February the 27th. On the page below, I will put all the tour dates, or at least a link to your page, which has the tour dates, and also a link to your Bandcamp, because if people want to buy your music, that's the best way to buy it. That's the place where you get more of the royalties rather than somebody who's wealthy enough to sponsor Barcelona's stadium. Anyway, thank you, Kath. Thank you to Peter. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Amelia. Highway to Heavenly on Skepwax. Go buy it. Cheers. Bye bye now.
Thanks very much,
Thanks.
Adrian.
Thank you.